John Reaves. How are we doing, everybody? How are you guys? Man, I am so excited about this podcast tonight. I know we really didn't give you guys a whole lot of time to get in here, but I am very, very stoked. Scott Sigler is joining us tonight, guys. So, to give you a little bit of backstory, I've been a massive fan of his since I first read his book. I just got out of high school. I was on tour. I had a book in my hands, and it was way before internet was just the thing. So, I read through all of his books and grew to love his content, man. Guy is amazing. Besides, oh my God, that girl Meg coming in clutch. My God, Meg. What? Songbird Beauty coming in here with the freaking bits. How are y'all doing tonight? Meg, thank you so freaking much. Holy shit. And you guys starting it off already almost at a hype train. Holy crap. But, ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a very warm welcome to my guy, Scott Sigler. I'm going to mute this really quick. We're going to bring him on in, and I'm going to check our levels. Please let me know. Thank you again, Meg. You are freaking amazing. Thank you so freaking much. I'm going to check our levels really quick, and we're going to get going with our podcast. Dun, dun, dun. How are you doing today, Scott?
Doing great, man. How you doing?
Doing really, really well. Really well. All things considered, we've got the old Big C out here tonight, so, you know, that's always fun, I guess. That's always fun. But
I hope you're recovering from it.
Oh yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. I've been running a lot. My house, there's a lot of space to run out here, so I've been trying to run it off. And fingers crossed,
cool.
They were almost done.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, Scott, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for people that don't know?
But for those watching who don't know, I am a fiction author and a podcaster. And that's, I started out by podcasting my fiction as free serialized episodic books on a bridge. I would just give everything away. This is before I was published. And that led to building up a pretty decent sized following. So when we finally did put out a print paperback from a really small Canadian imprint, I was able to get the audience to go buy it. And it went to #1 on Amazon in horror and sci-fi. It was #2 only to a Harry Potter book. So and I'm old enough, this is before ebooks. So it was going head to head against Stephen King's and the Anne Rice's, and New York Publishing was like, holy crap, we can't do that. And then that got me a print deal, and I've been writing ever since. And that's my jam.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I watched something about you saying that that's kind of how it got started. I think you were pitching at the time. Was it Earthcore you were pitching? And you're just trying to get some traction. You're like, you know what? If you guys aren't going to do it.
I'd been pitching for a long time. I think I'd been pitching for like 10 years at that point, and had 4 complete finished novels that I'd edited and revised. I was going to all the, going to science fiction conferences and writers conferences, trying to meet editors, trying to meet agents, sending out tons of submissions. And this is, when they didn't allow email submissions, so you just loaded up that manuscript and shipped it off somewhere.
Yeah.
And if the company I work for ever found out how much I spent on postage from their postage meter, I would have been in a lot of trouble.
Oh man.
But did that, and I think I collected 127 rejection letters before finally getting something published. So just banging away.
Man, I think that to me is so inspirational. The fact that like you literally, first of all, you put in the work before you actually even started putting in the marketing work. Like you wrote 4 complete books.
Yep.
Is this like Earthcore, we're talking Infected series and Ancestor?
It would be the books were Infected, Earthcore, Ancestor, and The Rookie. I had written all of those, and Infected at that point I had rewritten something like 10, 11 times from top to bottom, because the first one I wrote, it was horrible. So it was so bad. And I wrote it, I put it away, I went to work on Earthcore, and then 6 months later, without having anybody read it, I pulled out Infected and read it, and I was like, this is so awful. So awful. And then that's become my technique, was write something, put it away, forget what I thought I said, pull it out, read what's on the page, figure out what was terrible, and figure out how to fix the things that are terrible, whether that be style or attribution or description or plot. Okay, well, I suck at this. Let's get better at this. And then gradually that improved the style.
Yeah. And I'd actually read that quote of yours pretty much said like, put it in the shelf and just leave it there for a while.
Yep.
And that rings true a lot with music as well, too, for me in particular. Like, I'll write a song and then I'll be like, you get so close to it, you don't see those small things. Like, I'd imagine writing, there's a lot of, like, just small grammatical mistakes that you'll make that you would really not pick up on because you're, like, involved in the story. But with music, that's helped me a lot. Just even write it, get as much out as you can, and then back away from it, and then come back later, and you can appreciate the little things that you did even too.
Yeah, and also when you get away from it and stop being so close to it, you get more of an appreciation for it as a new listener or a new reader would.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really helps. Because the thing that killed me the most is I was writing and I was very verbose and overly descriptive. And then when I started to podcast stuff, I had to read it out loud and I would get bored. I'm like, this is so boring. And then I would have to go back and edit it and listen to it. And I'd be like, oh, I'm so awful at this. And I learned to just cut so much stuff out. And like that even impacts, like I play music too. And that impacts songwriting style. Cause you're like, we got to get this hook in here. We got to get this thing going. People have to understand the structure. It's very similar to writing. So yeah, the putting it away and coming back to it and finding out, listening to it like a first listener or first reader would really helps you make it better.
Yeah. So how did you get on your journey into being an author? Like, how did you, as a kid, where was the first little glimmer where you're like, I want to be an author?
There's two parts to the story. The first part is I went to see King Kong with my dad, and that was the first time I'd ever gone to a theater and with just me and my dad. And we went, and he loved it because he'd seen the original King Kong when he was a little kid with his dad. So it was a real cool moment. But we go in there and I thought I loved all the scary stuff and all the science fiction. I was so pumped. It was such a big moment. I'm like holding my dad's hand, like, this is awesome. My brother's not here. My mom's is so great. And we went in there, and this is like the old 76 version of King Kong. And there's the scene where Kong is just banging on the bamboo fortress. And I was so scared. I started crying. I wanted to leave. My dad thought that was hysterical because we had paid for it, so we weren't going anywhere. And he laughed while I cried. And I cried through the rest of the movie. And then we walked out of the theater, and I'm like sniffling, holding his hand. And as soon as we got out of the theater, I asked him, when can I go see it again? And that was like a light bulb for me that like being scared in a safe, dramatic environment is super fun. And I immediately want to be able to do that for other people. The other part of the story is, my mom was a big Stephen King fan. So every year for Christmas, I'd buy her Stephen King book, and the latest Stephen King and the latest Danielle Steele book. As I'm wrapping these up in my room, and I was like, I don't know, like 12 or 13 at the time. I'd already been writing a bunch, but got the book, wrapped it up. And it was a book by Stephen King called Cycle of the Silver Bullet. It's the one Silver Bullet was based off. Cycle of the Werewolf. Start reading through it. And I'm like, this is really good. And start reading it. And mom would come in and like, I'd hide the book under my desk. Who knew what she thought I was looking at, but she would ghost out. And I read the whole book, and then I wrapped it up for my mom. And that was the point where I kind of realized I can do that entertainment I want to do, but I don't have to rely on other people. I don't have to have a film crew. I just can write these stories myself. And from then on, it was off to the races. So from the 6th grade on, I'm very lucky that I've known exactly what I've wanted to do and have worked toward it ever since then.
Yeah, was Stephen King, was that book one of the first major books that you actually remember sitting down and going through?
Yeah, I'd read a bunch of like little Star Wars books and stuff, and like, teen fiction at that point. But all that stuff was great. Like I read a bunch of things I really liked, but I hadn't gotten into like the more hardcore literature, like, Stephen King, and I'm drawing a blank on it's a book called Seawolf by Jack London. Jack London's one of my favorites. I hadn't quite discovered that, and I wasn't old enough to appreciate it when I did read it. Like at that point, I'd read the first 30 pages of Dune and put it down. I'm like, I don't understand any of this. And so the Stephen King book was the first one by a really talented pro author who's really trying to scare the crap out of you that I read. So that was, from then on, I read everything I could. And then later on, I read Dune again when I think I was a freshman in college, and I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. So a lot of it was just starting to get enough life experience to appreciate what grown-up storytellers were doing.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people in chat talking about how much Stephen King is, they're fans of Stephen King, but then also they said Stephen King and Daniel Steele, such opposite ends of the spectrum. But
Yeah,
that's
totally.
awesome.
And I never made it through a Danielle Steele book. I tried a couple of times, like, cool, mom's into this. I'll see what this is like.
Yeah.
And I just like, I was a rambunctious little boy. It was always a bruise on me somewhere from getting into some kind of scuffle.
Mhm.
Always dirty, always smelly. And you read Danielle Steele, you're like, this is not for me. I
Yeah.
appreciate it, but this is not my jam.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I totally understand that, man. Well, so once you started writing, who were some of your influences? Obviously Stephen King, and
Yep.
then do you have some other like? Did you draw influence from not only authors but also like movies and?
I'm far more influenced by movies than books. Even though
Mhm.
I make a living writing books, all of my books are like they're a summer blockbuster screenplay on steroids. I'm
Yes,
always
yeah,
trying to give that proper pacing. And the biggest single influence is the movie Aliens.
yes,
So the storytelling style of James Cameron in that movie, where he's got overlapping arcs of tension. So this thing's going on, and then it peaks, and as it starts to come down, he's already building up another one, and they kind of intersect.
hmm
And I've watched Aliens well over 100 times, and it's to me, it's a masterpiece of structure
hmm
because you never get to fully relax. Like he like tricks you into thinking everything's okay and you can relax, but there's already something else percolating. So that's the single biggest, the most overwhelming influence is that in movies. And Quentin Tarantino is a huge influence. And there are Quentin Tarantino dialogue drops in every
Oh
book I've ever
yeah,
written.
yeah.
They're always in there somewhere, and I try and work these things into the natural dialogue in the book, but so I can pay my respects to the man there.
Heck yes.
Um, and Seawolf, Jack London is huge. Call of the Wild, Seawolf, A Dog Named Wolf.
hmm
Those are huge. Seawolf was kind of a book that changed my life just from reading it. It made me think about life in a way that at a younger age, I never processed before.
hmm
So those are the big ones: Stephen King, Jack London, Quentin Tarantino, James Cameron, Douglas Press, and Lincoln Child, who
hmm
wrote a book called Relic,
hmm
which is still holds up to this day. And if you're into biology and horror, it's magnificent.
Yeah,
And then those two guys were super kind to me when I was just a young aspiring writer.
that's
And I reached out to them like, hey man, will you guys read my book and give it a blurb? And they were like, sure. And this is before they blew up.
yeah.
So they were super nice and super helpful. And the Douglas Preston quote I have on my book for Earth Core
hmm
wound up getting me, I got to go in and read at bookstores, and publishers would look at it. So there was a while where I tried to pay that back and pay it forward to other people, but
That's
crazy
awesome.
story. Then they got so busy, people couldn't read everybody's book, and somebody started to stalk them and threaten their life. And they
Oh
were
my
like,
god.
whoa, all right,
Yeah, I'm gonna back off a
we're
little
out.
bit. Yeah.
We don't answer email. We don't do nothing. They were just out of it. But those guys are an influence too. So, and of course, Michael Crichton's another big
Oh
one.
my god.
Michael Crichton showing that you can use real fundamental accurate science
hmm
and then just blow it up to ridiculous proportions.
hmm
But since the basis of the story is stuff that we've all learned in classes, in science classes in high school, or
hmm
we've seen on TV, or we've seen on YouTube, having that, which is basically the cornerstone of my style, is have a foundation of stuff you already know and believe,
hmm
and then bump it up a notch to stuff that you might not know, but you might Google. You're like, oh, that's ridiculous. And just pause my
Yeah.
book, go Google, like, holy crap, that's an actual real thing.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I've got you. I own you at that point. Then basically everything I introduce after that, you stop looking it up and you bought the ticket, you're along for the ride. And that sense of believability, that
hmm
plausibility, that's what makes it work. So that's why Quentin Tarantino is such an influence, because his stuff is very plausible, even though it's ludicrous.
Yeah.
Michael Crichton's plausible, even though it's scientifically batshit crazy, but
Yeah.
it works.
Very much like I mean, like Once Upon a Time in what was Quentin's last movie? I'm trying
Once
to
Upon
think.
a Time in Hollywood, I think.
Yes, it's like
Mhm.
it's so believable, and people have actually Googled and they're like, "Did that really happen? Is this a real
Yeah,
story?" Like it's so believable. But yeah, and
yeah,
just like you're saying, man. I mean, like in Infected, whenever I first read that book, that was what it's like a very not slow start. I guess it's a slow starting forest fire. Like eventually that covers the earth. Like that's how I'd explain it. It starts off normal, like you said, and then my God, by the end of the book, you're like, I'm a changed man for reading this. It was it's a read for sure, man. And I always try to start people off on that one. I feel like that's probably one
that's
of
a
the
good one.
greatest like shake you into Scott Sigler fandom, you know?
That's a good one, is because it starts off with a scene that's pretty disturbing and pretty graphic right out of the gate. But then that is, as a huge fan of monster movies, in a 90-minute movie, a creature feature, they don't have time to do the slow build of a monster like I do in my book Ancestor. There's no way they can do that. So a lot of horror movies start with like, I'm just a janitor pushing a mop at the biology lab.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't understand the tech all these whiz kids are doing. And then some monster grabs and pulls them back into the shadows. And then you cut to somebody else and you follow a different story and you eventually build up to that. That's what Infected is kind of like. You get that opening slam bang scene. Then you get a perfectly normal guy in a cubicle working customer support for a software company. And then you gradually watch his life go completely off the rails. So hopefully by the time you get to the end of that book and things are bonkers, you're in. If you care about the characters at that point, if I've done my job correctly, my job, I describe to people, my job is to make you care deeply for someone that never existed. If I do that, then when I turn the screws in the story, you get your pull straight up and you're on the edge of your seat and you can't listen fast enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you've done that perfectly. Like, I can name characters, first and last names of yours that you've written, and they're like such influential characters, or just like they've got so much story behind them, like Pookie Chang. Freaking love Pookie. I like,
he's a blast.
Yeah. Long-term, maybe tattoo of Pookie. Okay. I don't know what he looked like, but yeah. But yeah, man, like you're really good at creating like a character that people actually care about, and I think that's very, very cool.
That's something I learned, because when I was more serious about it I was in college and I got a journalism degree because I knew I would always be writing. And from an athletic background, I'm not very coordinated, very tiny, not very fast. I got not a lot going for me in the world of athletics. But when I wrestled, I learned that if you just do constant repetitions and constant drill and keep working these techniques, eventually then if you can combine that with a very surly, angry attitude, you can have a lot of success and beat people you shouldn't beat because you have just put in more work.
Yeah.
So when I was at that phase of life where I'm like, everything Stephen King put out, I just devoured it. And I was reading everything I could about when he would talk about the craft. And that's one of the things I picked up. I still remember sitting in I think it was sitting in a chemistry class, reading a People magazine behind the textbook where Stephen King talking about writing. He's like, and he said, his job is to create very believable characters, make you fall in love with those characters, and then put them in the pressure cooker and turn up the heat and see what happens. And that sort of resonated with me. I'm like, oh, that's why, like you said, like I remember characters' names. I remember Jack Torrance's name. I remember all these secondary characters because he's done such a good job at introducing them. Here's a normal person. You would like them sort of, but they're also kind of a jerk, but they're also kind of okay. It's like your pals, Yeah. And then all of a sudden, when the batshit crazy starts to happen to him, you're sucked in because you got an emotional connection to the character. Yeah. So that's something I learned from Stephen King very early on.
Did you read his book on writing? I think it's like Stephen King on writing.
Read it several times. That is the Bible. I recommend to people. I've read a lot of books on writing, and every book on writing has a lot of super cool stuff in it, things you can pick up. But that book, the two biggest things in that book, and this is stuff when I work with younger authors or people say, hey man, can you take a look at this? The first thing I see in every one of those books is 80,000 words, synonyms for said. Oh, yeah. He extorted, he replied, he coughed, like it's he said, it's she said, and depending on the book you're writing, it's they said. And like that's 95% of what you should be doing, because the word said that attribution becomes completely invisible. After a while, your eyes, it glazes over. You still know who's talking because it's a pronoun, and if you set up your antecedent correctly, but it becomes invisible, and you're just reading. Now it's like reading a script. You're just reading dialogue. Yeah. When the author gets too involved with all of this attribution and too many adverbs and adjectives, it makes the person remember their reading instead of the person being lost in the story. To me, it's a lot like if you're watching a great movie and then all of a sudden you see the boom mic dip down, like, oh crap, okay, that's a mistake. You see a mistake in the movie, it takes you out for a moment. So that's the biggest thing. And the other thing he did that was just so revelatory to me is he as best he can remember, he wrote down this article. He wrote about a junior high basketball game when he was working for the paper, the local paper. And he shows you this. And he said, I gave it to my editor. He says his editor was some old crotchety guy with one eye, he's like, it's only Stephen King. In
editor.
2 sentences, you already know this character. It's amazing. And then Stephen King shows you the same story that half of it is lined out. But when you read them both, it's exactly the same story. Cutting it out didn't change anything about the story. It just got rid of all this stuff that wasn't necessary. Like a sculptor, you don't sculpt a person out of a tree. You just remove the wood that isn't the person. And his way of describing that in On Writing is incredible. So those 2 things alone for that book make it, to me, the most valuable writing book that you can find. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like just how you said that, it's beautiful. And there's a lot of authors that I've read that are kind of like a lot of musicians, I guess, apparently have written books in the last couple of years. And yeah, I can tell that they have probably not read that book because there's a lot of things that they're using. Because I guess, I don't know, like they're trying to keep it spicy or something by saying other words.
Yeah, I mean, I remember Joe Lansdale is another amazing American author, does a lot of horror writing. But when I was early on, like I said, going to the conventions to try and meet agents, meet editors, and Joe was a guest of honor. And so he wrote like a piece to go in the program. And I read through 5 pages. I remember telling my girlfriend at the time, looking at him like, dude, I think I can do this because look, he just uses the word said all the time. And like, I could say this. And you get excited as a nascent writer that you're like, I believe I can bring all of this pizzazz to things.
Yeah.
And you have to go through that. You have to go through that phase. You do that. You put it away by reading. Like, why did I say he extolled? Why did I say he angrily, vehemently denied? Like, that's not, it sounds cool when you're writing it and it's exciting, but after you've done it enough, you're like, he said, that's it. And then you let the words themselves speak to the reader, and they should be able to interpret, the emotional reaction. But everybody goes through it. Stephen King went through it. I bet Joe Lansdale went through it. Everybody in the world goes through that phase. Except now what you get, it's really fascinating. There are some authors who are such good storytellers who've completely skipped big publishing, completely skipped it. They put out ebooks, then they put out audiobooks. They know how to market. They know how to use Facebook. And they are out there with these great stories, and they're making bank. They're selling tons of books and people love it. But when you read through it, you're like, a lot of the writing to old school guy like me comes across a little kludgy because you're like, they haven't had that moment where you sit down with the guy with the one eye who's crouching. You say like, you don't need any of this, kid. Get rid of this. This fat's gotta go. They don't have that experience. So it's, you don't need those guys anymore to be successful at writing. So it all depends on what you likes.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, do you feel like you've kind of helped pave the way for how to be successful as an author without those big publications? Being the first podcast and doing
I think my work in podcasting was influential in some circles, and it really it was part of an early crop of people who became popular on social media. And then so if my story did anything, it was opening up some eyes in New York to be like, because when I would send in submissions and I'd be like, I have 50,000 people listening to my stories every week. And I was like, here are my webits. Here's my stats. Here's all of this, all these analytics. And they would just be like, we don't even know what is the internet. Like they had no idea what all the numbers mean. And Dane Cook did this to a much larger degree than I did. He was like trying to tell, like, I have a massive following. Just give me a show, give me a tour. And everybody's like, dude, you're not that funny. This isn't, what are you doing? And then as soon as he went out on tour, he was like, he's packing every house he goes to. He's selling millions of copies of his records. So people learned social media through stories like that. My smaller story in publishing is when the Ancestor hit #1 at Amazon in horror and sci-fi, that was a wake-up call to New York. They're like, who is this guy? How did he do this? So that part is where I might have had some small influence, but shortly after I got my book deal, because I immediately went straight to big publishing. That's when ebooks started to come out, and ebooks started to increase in their market share. And then you've got thousands of people who have no idea who I am, who learn to put out good ebooks on a regular basis, get them edited, learn how to market and everything. That's what really changed the business overall, is people good at writing and marketing ebooks and making hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars without ever going near big publishing and ignoring big publishing. So that's what really changed the game.
I mean, listening to it, you've got 4 books that you came out with before you'd actually even receive your own publishing deal. What were you doing for an income? Like, what was your daily job before you?
I was a marketing guy. I worked for a couple of software companies. I started out as a newspaper writer. That's what I went to school for.
Yeah.
And I was a sports reporter for a year. And then I found that as soon as the cycle started over again, like I started to get bored. So I started getting more of the hard news, and I would go people bag on reporters a lot, man. But if you sit through a school board meeting when you do not have a kid in that school, when you're not a school board member, it's the worst. It's the worst. Local reporters will actually endure that stuff to distill it down and tell people what's going on in their community. That's not an easy job.
No.
It's just not an easy job. And to do it well is very difficult. So I was doing all that and I'm like, oh, I have made a horrible mistake with my life. And then I worked for a small chain of newspapers in Michigan called Hometown Newspapers. We reported for six town cities. And we had a serial killer come through town. His name was Leslie Allen Williams. And I think he killed 5 girls in the areas that I reported on. And the first girl to go missing, such a tragic story. She goes missing. Her boyfriend is the prime suspect. And the cops won't leave him alone because they have no idea there's a serial killer going on. And then the mother built a relationship with one of my buddy reporters because he was the crime reporter. And she kept going to him like, can you just get another story out? All I want to do is communicate that if whatever happened, you can come home. It's okay. We'll fix it. And this poor lady was just heartbroken, and she's banging away every day, trying to get the word out, hoping somewhere her runaway daughter will see that it's okay to come home. This goes on for over a year. And then finally they catch this guy, and they find out that this girl was buried on a golf course. And of course it's been over a year. So she's just, it's not going to be pretty no matter how you do it. And the editor of the paper comes into the press room, and the guy's name was Marty. He's like, Marty, they found the body. I need you to call the mother and get a reaction. And Marty's like,
oh my God,
what? I'm not going to call the mother. Her teenage daughter was murdered and left on a golf course. Reporter, the editor, without missing a beat, because this was his job, he's like, call the mother or you're fired. And
oh my God,
this was after, like, I would watch like a tornado would come through town, and the newsroom would get pumped, man. They're like, oh man. And they would all go out there because, like, destroyed homes and things like that. If it bleeds, it leads. And those tragedy stories are how people win awards, and win awards, you move up in the industry. Still news, they're covering things, but watching people get excited about potential bad things, I don't know how to do that.
Oh my God.
So then after good reporters are a different breed of people. It's a very important job to be out there and be in people's faces all the time. And when politicians are like, I'm not going to answer that question, press for the answer, get that information, taxpayer money's being spent on this, et cetera, you got to be an asshole. To be a good reporter, you have to be an asshole. And as much of an asshole as I am, I wasn't good at being that kind of an asshole. So when the guy came to Marty, if you don't call the mother, you're fired. And Marty had 3 kids, and he's like, so he had to call the mother. He couldn't quit, so I quit. So I told the editor to go fuck himself. I quit. Dang. And then I scrambled around to find a job, and I lucked into doing software support for a company that wrote software for newspapers. And there were only 12 people in the company at the time. And then by the time I left, there were over 200. It was a startup. So it went pretty good. And I went from being a tech support guy, which is why I infected the main character's tech support guy, because that's what I was doing at the time.
Nice.
And then I was I was also terrible at tech support. I have no patience. I was bad at that job. And I moved into marketing, and I found my home. I'm like, okay, so my job is to find the people who want to buy the stuff that we make, and then show them the stuff we make so they buy it, everybody wins. This is a happy job.
Yeah, for real.
And I did that, and I was doing that. I was doing that right up until I got the deal with Random House.
Mhm.
And at that point, it was a big deal, and it was a huge decision for my wife at the time and I.
Mhm.
We had to be like, are we going to bank all this money and keep working, or do we live off this so I can focus on writing and marketing and podcasting and social media?
Yeah.
And live off this, and I can go all in on this for the next. We figured the money would last for like 2 or 3 years,
Mhm.
and it worked out. That worked out because having the ability to focus on it and do
Mhm.
nothing but that let me build the audience, and then we were able to get other book deals and keep going from there.
Yeah, and I mean the fact that you had 4 already completed novels. I mean, did you have to do much, I guess, post editing afterwards after you got this deal, or?
Hell yes. The guy who edited my first book, Infected, and he also edited Earthcore and Ancestor and Pandemic and Contagious.
Oh my
His
God.
name's Julian Pavia, and I used to call him the Shiv because I would get these stacks of pages back, my manuscript back, with just all this red through it.
Oh God.
And I'm like, you murdered somebody, and there's spatter all over my book, dude. And I was very, very full of ego and pride at the time. And I would get these back, and I would get mad.
Yeah.
And I'd go through, like, oh, you want to go to war? We'll go to war. I'll rewrite this. And he did a great job with Infected. But he tore it apart, and
Mhm.
we had to go back and he's like, the bones of the story are great. These characters are great. You suck at this, and this. And so we rolled up our sleeves. We went to work on it, and he made me, without a doubt, a better writer.
That's
I was
awesome.
able to do 5 books with him, which is almost unheard of in the publishing industry. You usually get a different editor every book.
Mhm.
So he's a huge reason I have the life I have now.
That's awesome.
You may be familiar with some of his other works. He did a little book called The Martian.
Oh my God.
He found it. He
Jeez.
signed the guy. He edited a little book called Ready Player One.
My God.
My
Wow.
first editor was an absolute rock star.
Yeah, good
who's
God.
just a huge name in the world of editing. So I got really lucky, but he saw the manuscript and he was like, I can't wait to get at this. So yeah, my writing, I improved by leaps and bounds thanks to this guy.
I think that's cool. I mean, like, it's probably very humbling, like you said. I mean, for you to be like kind of like on the top of the world. Was this post you getting signed, and then he comes in and enters the picture?
He was the reason I got signed,
Mhm.
because I'd had a wonderful agent named Joshua Bilmus of the Jabberwocky Literary Agency, and I'd had him, I think, for 9 years.
Mhm.
And this dude was working his butt off. He was hustling. He's slinging my manuscripts, going to all the cons.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get anything done. And I think to this day, I think he's awesome and highly recommended to anybody. You want to pitch your book? Go talk to Jabberwocky. They will tell you whether you got legs or not.
Yeah.
After 9 years, I was so frustrated. I'm like, I got to try something different. And
Mhm.
it was like, it's the worst breakup I've ever had. All the romances I've had in my life, the worst breakup was
Oh,
this
God.
guy who took a chance on me to be my agent. And I
Yeah.
had to, like, 9 years, and it's not working. And then I've had a new agent. His name is Bird Level, who I'm still working with to this day. And Bird was my agent for about 3 months, right when I put out Ancestor in paperback, as I mentioned earlier,
Mm.
and it hit those high numbers on Amazon. And then Bird just like the Cheshire Cat. He was like, oh, let me go to work, Sig. And he sent it to a bunch of editors who had never seen it before. Julian was one.
Mhm.
And that got into an auction. It got into a bidding war for the
Oh, dang.
book. And Julian Pavia was the guy who went to the head of his company. He was like, we've got to sign this book.
Yeah.
Win this off. We got to sign this book. So he went to bat for me. And I, like, literally the entire lifestyle I have now is thanks to that guy and my agent. They really knocked it out of the park.
That is insanely awesome, man. And also
Yeah.
thanks to like your motivation and your tenacity, man. I read somewhere that one of your first books that you wrote was actually in like 4th grade. Tentacles, and more tentacles.
Tentacles, and more tentacles.
And, like-
I already knew what I wanted to do, and it's this. Basically, like you get to make your own little book, like 15, 16 pages in it. And that immediately started drawing pictures of monsters with tentacles.
Yes.
And if anybody's interested, after your podcast, go to YouTube and Google Scott Sigler tentacles, and more tentacles. We found it one day. I think it was at my mom's, and I found it. I'm
Oh my
like,
God.
oh my God, this is great. And then I got to read it to a live audience at Dragon Con.
Dude,
It's
that's awesome.
hysterical.
But that's,
Yeah, but I mean, I would eventually, I knew I would get to a level where I could get my book into the marketplace.
Mhm.
And this is all I did. I mean, I was also in multiple bands and had multiple jobs, but I was working this stuff all day long.
yeah.
I would get up before work and write. I would write at lunch. I would write after work. I would write at night, and I was constantly revising, trying to get better. But the getting that ally at the big publisher at Random House to go to bat for you.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen all that often.
Yeah.
And even when it does, a lot of times the people higher up are like, wrong, that author doesn't have the right look. That author's too old, too young, too fat, too skinny. It's all this different stuff. On top of the book has to be lights out to begin with. It's just like being in the movies. There's so much to it, that's there. Having someone go to bat and have enough power to get that deal signed, I would still be a writer. I would still be a full-time writer. I would still be writing great stuff and trying to entertain the hell out of people. It would not have happened like it happened without that guy.
That makes sense. That makes sense, man. I love hearing that. And like, your story is unique in the fact that it's yours. A lot of content creators that I've met that have been able to go full-time content creation, whether it's like YouTube videos or like Twitch streamers and stuff, just hearing that, like, a lot of people think, maybe whenever your book Ancestor came out, people are probably like, who is this guy? He's overnight success. Where did he come from? But yeah, like, you've got all these years of hard work that you've been grinding the shit out of it for before, and nobody sees that part,
I get that. I get that with my pals a lot. Like, look at this stupid YouTuber making all this money. I'm like, dude, that person, this is all they do. They're a big time YouTuber. They are cranking this out like 16 hours a day. This is all they do. And that's why you can tell people have that big YouTube audience. And then the second it starts to drop off, you can just seem to be like, I'm so exhausted.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm out. I'm not going to do this anymore. I got something in the bank, because it's grueling. And, and it's, you think of all the people who do work it for 12, 16 hours a day and never get that following. Yeah. Overnight successes are not a thing. There are some rare exceptions. If you are a, unusually attractive human being and you decide to stream and you've just got the right look at the right time and people gravitate, I mean, that brings people in, but you still have to work and make regular content that people want to engage with. So some people can get a leg up by getting lucky, right place, right time, but it's a lot like being a pro athlete. There's no lucky pro athletes. There's nobody who's stumbled into that. I mean, you may have been born 6'4", 315 and can bench press a truck, but there was also 50 other guys like that at your same college. It's like people who succeed in content creation, people who succeed in athletics, there is no luck in any of that. People who make it work their asses off.
Hell yes. And that's, I don't know. I just like to hear the stories of like hard work paying off. I feel like that's a really big thing. And I think a lot of people can relate to it or aspire to it,
I think there's a mindset to it. And you hear a lot of people like who've made it, like 50 Cent, but back in the day, like get rich or die trying.
Yeah.
That's all it is. You are like, I am going to do this. I'm going to do this until I succeed or until it kills me. And there's an amazing amount of freedom in that. There's just, when you figure that out, you're like, I might die penniless and insane, and I'm okay with that. I would rather die penniless and insane than have a comfortable life doing something else and always wondering what would have happened if I had gone all in on the thing that makes me get up in the morning and want to go after shit. And, I think there's a lot of people who don't succeed at stuff, and there's obviously there's bitterness, and, and even I have some, like, I'm not at the level I had hoped I would be. And that stuff pisses me off. But at the same time, not having that and having this, or at least having gone after it is, I'm really glad I did not stick with marketing software.
Yeah.
Way more fun.
For real. There's a saying that's hell is a view of seeing what you could have been if you weren't afraid to try. And I definitely agree with that, man. I definitely agree. Well, going back into it, so right after you released these, I mean, was it almost, I mean, you already had a crowd built in really before you had this publishing deal, and what was it like directly after the release of these? Was just kind of, I mean, now looking back at it.
It was so bonkers. It was so bonkers. Like, because remember, I had been working since the 6th grade. to try and figure this business out and get into it. I had spent thousands of dollars going to cons, flown thousands of miles when I could not afford to do any of that. And I had done all this, and then I'm working jobs, working away, and I'm writing. And then all of a sudden the ancestor thing happens, and I'm at work, trying to come up with marketing plans and stuff. And the phone would ring, and it was like my new agent Bird, like, yeah, Simon & Schuster just weighed in and they offered this much. And I'd be like, holy, are you shitting me? Like I'd sold like one story for $50. Like I just had no track record. Yeah. And this boy, he's like, and I'd be like, okay, are we taking this? He's like, nah, I think I'm going to wait a little while.
He lowballed us.
I'm like, oh my God, take the goddamn, what are you talking about? What if they change their mind? He's like, Sig, I got this. He would just hang up on me. Phone would ring the next day, like, okay, now, now Random House is waiting with this. So all that was going on. And then all of a sudden I go from, the place I was working did audio programs for Fortune 500 companies. So I was literally sneaking into the office at 3:00 in the morning to record podcast episodes.
Oh, damn.
I could use the good equipment. So, I wasn't sleeping. I'm going in, I'm recording for an hour, editing, then getting the hell out of there before the boss shows up, going home, getting a nap, coming back in. It was nonstop. So all of this is going on, and I've got a great audience online. I'm having a lot of fun and doing fun stuff. We're releasing Earthcore, and then all of a sudden we've got this deal. Yeah, we've got a 1-book deal for Random House. Great. And then Julian writes us and he's like, listen, I think Random House would like this to be a trilogy. Is it a trilogy? And I'm like, yes, it is. It's like, could you write us? Do you have anything on the next 2 books? I'm like, nah, not really. He's like, just, can you write a couple of paragraphs? I wrote 2 paragraphs, sent it in. And then they bought 2 more books. So now it became 3-book deal. Then they wanted to own the Scott Sigler brand. So I had Earthcore and Ancestor out. Then they call back and like, we want to buy those 2 books, get them off the market. Maybe we'll put them out. So like, so if I go from absolutely nothing to a 1-book deal, to a 3-book deal, to a 5-book deal.
Oh my God.
All of this is happening in a matter of 1 week.
That was 1 week?
Yeah, that was like this after the auction sold. So I think this whole thing went down. This is like a 3-week process to get to this. Jesus. 2 weeks of it going through auction, 1 week, 1 book, 3 books to 5 books. I am freaking out, man. I cannot believe I'm sure none of this is actually going to happen. I'm convinced none of this will happen. Get the contract, sign the contract. And then the next day after I sign the contract, phone rings. It's the agent again. Oh my God. He's like, yeah, Rogue Pictures just wants to option it for a movie. Oh. And then the next week I'm driving down, I was in San Francisco. I'm driving to LA and having freaking meetings with people at Rogue Pictures. So at this point, I'm Cinderella. This stuff's going. Yeah. So, and then reality starts to hit in a little bit. Oh like God. A lot of authors get that option, like, oh my God, Trevor looks gonna be in my movie. It's great. And I'm like, I'm like, okay, there's no movie yet. Just, dude, cash the check and be happy, but it's probably not going to happen. Yeah. And so all this, so that's what it was like. Like all of a sudden, all this stuff just coming out of nowhere, and all the years of hard work are kind of paying off, and there's money coming in, and I'm like, then I make the decision like, nope, I am not putting this all in the bank. I'm living off this. We're going full time. Oh, yeah. And a lot of those things fell apart as it went on. Like it took 6 months to get the first draft of the screenplay in for the book. And at this point they were talking to a little unknown actor named Channing Tatum, about playing Perry Dawsey.
Oh my God. Perry Dawsey, Channing Tatum. Oh my God.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know anything about him. He's in a dancing movie. Yeah. I'm like, they're like, go watch the dancing movie. I go watch a dancing movie, and like Channing Tatum's like, just ripped. And I'm like, okay, he can pull this off. This will be awesome. Yeah. And then took 6 months to get the first draft screenplay. It was so bad that Rogue Pictures wouldn't let me read it. Oh God. And they asked the guy to go back and rewrite it. And it took him a year to rewrite it. Oh my God. So now we're 18 months into a 2-year option to make the movie. And they get a second draft. They don't like that. And then Relativity Media bought out Rogue Pictures, and they just canceled everything that wasn't already being made. So,
Damn.
that Cinderella moment was super fun, but gradually all of it started to fall off. So it was great. I enjoyed the hell out of it. But by the end of the 5 books, it was pretty clear I was right back to work,
Yeah.
banging away every day, trying to connect with the audience, trying to make cool stuff for cool people. So it was great.
That is insane to me to think that we almost had ourselves a Channing Tatum, Perry Darcy. And
it was nuts, man. It was nuts. And that's when I talk about where the career could have gone and I fully admit I'm bitter that didn't happen. I have great life. I get to write stuff for people. It's super fun. I'm also really competitive, and that would have been even more awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we were talking about the movie and having meetings with people and stuff, it was just like, if that movie had been made, I'd be in a completely different strata.
Yeah.
Because as an author, once you get to a certain level of sales, your book's in front of so many people that even when you have a book that sells half as well, that's still more than 99% of the authors are ever going to see. So it would have totally changed things. And if it had wound up being a series, it could have been affected contagious pandemic, would have been nuts, but never did get to Channing Tatum. I'm sure he would have done a great job.
Well, there's a little bit of bitterness in my heart for that for you as well too. So, we're sharing some bitterness here. But do you feel like it's kind of been like that with some of the other, I guess, with movies and stuff like Infected and Ancestor. I know those have both been things that have been talked about to either be into a movie or now into a TV show, possibly even to get picked up. Do you feel like that might be something where you'll end up taking the reins on this and then making something happen, kind of like you have with your books and podcasting and stuff?
Yeah, my scriptwriting partner and I just had a meeting with a producer today, like phoned me a new producer today, and we're trying to do, and like without having had something made, I am like this far above people who have no experience in the industry at all. Like the industry is very short memory, and right now everybody's making decisions on movies. Never heard of me, no idea. So we're kind of coming from scratch. I get a little bit of a leg up sometimes. Like I publish all these things like, okay, we'll hear your idea. And then it usually gets shot down. It's a super, super competitive area, but we're still banging away at that. Nocturnal will go out and be shot for TV. We've got original screenplays that we're trying to get made, trying to get Infected back on track. So we're looking for all of these things, but you have hit the nail on the head. The way to get ahead in this business is to go out and make your own movie. It can be a short. It can be, if you can organize enough to make a bad feature, you are drastically farther ahead than where I am now, because the people who write $100,000, $1 million, $10 million checks don't want to gamble. They want to be like, okay, I see you have made this incredibly shitty movie, which makes you a better movie maker than the vast majority of people trying to compete in Hollywood. Yeah. People want to see that you can put a shoot together, get it made, get it finished, get distribution. So that's kind of how you get into the business these days. As far as I know, it's like eventually after I finish a bunch of deadlines, we'll go make something. We'll make something like filmmaker friends, and we'll sit down, we'll figure out, write a screenplay that can be shot with the resources we have. We have one location. Write me a story that fits in this one location, which I've tried to do a bunch of times. It hasn't happened yet, but eventually it will. But once we get something made, then you're in a different ballgame. Then you have different kinds of meetings with people. Because a lot of people in Hollywood, people talk about all these bad movies that come out, these horrible sequels and all these remakes and all this other stuff. People in Hollywood just don't want to get fired. That's their main objective.
Yeah.
If they greenlight something that costs $20 million and that makes $2 million back, they're gone. There's no forgiveness in that business at all. So they need to see that you have done something that either got made or that you made it and eventually went to market. And that's what we have to do. We have to make something.
And I don't know if you follow this very much, but like, this is so nerdy. The Power Rangers, right? Power Rangers movie actually just had a Kickstarter campaign that I'm pretty sure was just successful for I think it's like a reboot or like some type of a sequel to the original Power Rangers, and it's called Legend of the White Dragon, I believe is what it is. Or but I mean, like that type of game plan and strategy for turning something into a movie like that, I believe is becoming kind of more trending, and like bands like While She Sleeps recently just did a Kickstarter thing or a Patreon where their fans are now producing their albums for them. And I think that crowdfunding is getting to be a lot more kind of in that industry and kind of more trending.
Yeah, well, that's where it'll get to. So like we'll We'll come up with an idea. We'll make sure we can shoot it. We have the gear. We have the people. You got to have actors and actresses attached to it. And you know, like all that stuff has happened. Then you put that whole package up. And I think once we put that package up for crowdfunding, I think with my audience, we'll probably do pretty good. As long as we don't get crazy with the amounts, be able to bring that in. And then, you know, because a lot of people who doing their day job would just love to be an executive producer or anything. And like, I just want to see my name in the credits at the end. There are thousands of people like that who would love to participate in something creative like that, but that's not their jam. Yeah. So, eventually that's exactly what we'll do. We'll come up with a project, crowdfund it, see how that goes. And then work really, really hard to make sure that those people who, you know, first in, first out money wise, if somebody I don't know puts in 250 grand on this thing, that person's going to get paid back before I do. That's the other tricky part.
Well, there you go. Well, look, I'm just saying we're getting that Channing Tatum paid. It's going to.
It would be great because every actor has their unknown. They come up, they're huge. Yeah. Then everybody's career runs its course. Mine ran its course, and then you come down, you're much smaller. So I'm hoping catch Channing Tatum on the back end somewhere. He's like, you know, I've been on vacation for a while. I've done a movie. Sure, I'll do. That would be. Boom. That would be the best of all worlds to suddenly find that guy and make a movie with him. Be so awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's not beyond the realm of possibility, my friend. Also, we've got somebody in chat here, Gurus 19 or 1219. Okay. And he was saying, actually, okay, so I met you at a book signing, maybe like it might have been for Infected. I cannot 100% remember, but my brother looks almost identical to you. And you actually signed in the book to my illegitimate son, Nick. It was hilarious. Made his day. So he just wanted me to say hello.
Cool.
But do you have plans? So Nocturnal, do you have plans for a sequel to that? Is that something that will, eventually get?
Yeah, that's been on hold. That's been on hold for a long time because I've been working with Lloyd Levin, who is the producer of The Green Zone and Hellboy and Boogie Nights.
Oh God.
And he's been trying to get Nocturnal made as a TV show for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we actually sold it twice.
Oh my God.
We sold it twice to one company was Entertainment One, and we sold it. I actually wrote that down. Hold on. That's I Am Global. So we sold the pilot twice. And then this is the other thing people don't know about Hollywood. We sold a pilot. These companies were getting ready to make, and then personnel changes, things went wrong. And then they go like, okay, we're done. You know, here's your quick claim. Now the property belongs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I become really jaded. Like when somebody wants to talk about making something of mine, I'm very happy to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. Very polite. What can I do to help you make this happen? While knowing it's probably not going to happen. So don't get too crazy. But the Nocturnal pilot script was written by Paul DeMeo and Danny Bilson, who wrote The Rocketeer, who wrote Defy Blood, a Spike Lee movie just out on Netflix. Mm-hmm. So a super powered team and, you know, good story, good book, great script writers. Lloyd Levin did friggin' Hellboy. Still can't get it.
Oh my God.
So we waited because if somebody buys that, they might want to buy the rights to the second, third, fourth, fifth books. Mm-hmm. So you just have to wait for that. Okay. But if that's not going to happen eventually, we will get to I have 4 sequels and a prequel planned. I just don't know when I'll get to them.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, there you go. Gives me some good hope then. Gives me some good hope for some characters that like are very memorable. Anybody that has not read some of your books that's in chat right now, I'm going to be posting links for sure.
Sweet.
You have to buy. You have to get some of these books. And also your podcasting. You said whenever you were working before you had actually quit your job, you were recording these podcasts. Were you doing the character voices and character reads just like how did that get started?
It got started because me and my group of friends in high school, we were all nerd jocks. So, you know, we would go to football practice all week, play the game on Friday night, then Saturday morning we were in somebody's basement playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, there you go.
So it's just as we were around each other, and we're all huge movie buffs, and we're all huge stand-up comedy fans. Mm-hmm. So there was almost never a time when we actually spoke in our own normal voices. It was everybody all the time. It was always a character, it was always a voice. It was always dropping one-liners from comedians and imitating comedians. So when I started recording Infected, I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm like, well, I think a straight read is kind of boring, so I'll just start doing character voices for everything. Mm-hmm. And that's how it started. And that's what got attention from the people listening to it. So I've just kept on doing it. And at this point, it's like somewhere over 300 individually voiced
Oh my God.
characters. Because there's been, 15 books that we put out. So you try, in our theory here is, my wife, my business partner, is also an audiobook narrator. Our theory is she's not Meryl Streep. She's a better actress than I am by far, better acting than I am. She's not Meryl Streep. I'm not Bruce Willis, any kind of great actor. But if I do a Bruce Willis impression for a character, that drives the character to sound different from all the other characters I've done. So our theory is, if I can make a character sound different and recognizable, we're done. That's all we have to do, because I don't have listeners going, man, it's really weird. That was exactly the same voice for this character in this book and this character for this book. So that's what we do. We call up YouTube. We watch stand up. We're always taking notes. Like, oh, that guy's great. Write it down. Like, that'll be a character. And we just have this battery. So we'll go through, it's time for a character. Okay, this character's gonna be Chris Rock. Okay, this character's gonna be Kevin Hart. And we just go through, and then I do bad impressions of stand-up.
That's awesome, man. Did you ever think that like voice acting was gonna be like a thing that you could say that I mean, at this point, for sure, professional voice actor. I mean, that's on the resume, man. That is on the resume.
No, but I tell you what, if I had known I could do this and go for it for a living when I grew up in this little tiny town in northern Michigan, I would have done that instead of going after the writing, because it's so much fun. It's so much fun.
Well, we've got a couple of fan questions here.
Shoot.
One of my favorite ones is, with the advancements in technology and the abundance in news, has there been a story that you've read or seen that felt like it was right out of one of your books?
Well, there's been a past couple weeks, the first successful heart transplant from a pig into a human.
Oh, I saw that.
And it worked. I haven't followed up. I'm guessing the guy's dead by now.
I need to get an interview with this guy. Yeah, for sure.
But that is the basis of my book, Ancestor, is genetically modifying pigs so that they have internal organ. Pig internal organs are basically the same size and function as anything in a human. So a pig is an ideal animal to transplant organs to save human lives, because there's not enough human organs to go around. And but they try to do this, but the problem is, you put a pig heart in a human, they can connect it, it'll work. The human immune system will attack it because it's not self, and the immune system will actually kill the host, kill the heart, kill itself. It's the way it's always been. So the book is about how to change the genetic structure of the pig body so that you can put these organs into a person and not only save lives, but make billions of dollars at the same time. Yeah. So that's Ancestor. And they've just done it with the heart. They've just done it. They did with kidneys. I read today. They just put in two pig kidneys, and they work. And if it sticks, the person will survive with functioning pig kidneys.
Oh my God.
So that kind of stuff happens. Kind of stuff happens a lot with my hearts. Cause I've got all these wonderful scientists who help me with my books. And I'm like, I have this idea. And then these guys will be like, oh, wow, I just saw this. I saw this paper on this. It's like this. You could do this instead, but it's related. So I've been fortunate enough to get in on some stuff that isn't commonly known yet. Yeah. And then I put that in a book, and then those things come true. And it's pretty cool.
Did they consult with you before
No,
they
didn't.
Pig heart?
The other one that's been bonkers for me is the series is the Infected Trilogies: Infected, Contagious, and Pandemic. And Pandemic came out in 2014. And even though a large percentage of the book is set in the Trump Tower in Chicago, this is before President Trump announced that he was going to run for office. So it's completely apolitical, if anybody's worried one way or another. But that book, called Pandemic, focuses on a highly contagious pathogen that in the book turns people into crazy killing creatures, and it's very different from the modern day. But the focal point of the book was, I was like, the government eventually comes like, here's a cure, all you have to do is drink this, and filling the book with chat room arguments and Twitter arguments about people like, don't take the meds, it's a trick, don't believe it, blah, and then watching everything that's gone down with the pandemic, it's been like, this is crazy. I wrote about this.
For real.
6 years ago. Not just, I mean, of course, everybody knew a pandemic was going to happen at some point. It was absolutely inevitable. All the hardcore scientists and doctors like this will happen at some point. They knew it. So that wasn't the thing. The thing that freaks me out reading it is I thought I was pushing it a little too far with my internet arguments in the book. Turns out I was way under the bar.
Oh yeah, Twitter is a freaking dumpster fire of that.
Dumpster fire.
It's insane.
Terrible.
It's insane. How did the idea behind Infected and the entire trilogy of that? How did that idea kind of come together?
It's pretty much all of my modern sci-fi horror stories. Infected, Contagious, Pandemic, Ancestor, Earth Core, Mount Fitzroy. They all are a bunch of different things I see all come together. So like I'll use Ancestor as an example. I read about xenotransplantation, which is taking animal parts, putting them into people. Read about all the problems. And this is something people have been working on for 50 years because there's so much hope of saving so many lives and improving the quality of life for so many people. Like that's cool. But I mean, that stuck in my head. And then I read a paper on this team that was trying to reverse engineer the genome, the mammalian genome, by going through and finding commonalities in genes and proteins and working backwards. So a giraffe and a mouse don't look like they have that much in common. And there's all this DNA that's divergent, but there's a big chunk of DNA that is the same. And they just kind of try to take the tree of life and reverse it, see if they can figure out what the ancestor of all mammals was, so they could figure out when mammals diverged from reptiles, proto-mammals, synapses, and started to evolve. Yeah. I'm like, that's a super cool idea. How can I work that? And then I'm such a huge fan of aliens. I also had this idea, well, that's cool that these black, icky, creatures are after you, but what if it was something like a little bit more familiar, like a cow or like a dog or something like that. So those three things came together. So I said, what if somebody's trying to reverse the mammalian genome in order to create a clean mammal without endogenous retroviruses, which are virus material that's already in your DNA, and you pass it down. And what people are afraid of with the animal transplantation is if there's an endogenous retrovirus in a pig and that virus catches in a human and the human genome has no defense against this because no humans ever had this before, that's how you could get things like bird flu, like swine flu, or like the pandemic we have now, where there's the potential for it to be the 1900s flu and millions of people die and you can't control it. So that's in the book. I'm like, great. So we take this reverse engineering the mammalian genome, go back to the first mammal, which doesn't have any of these viruses yet. It's impossible. We do that all in the computer, and then we'll modify that so it'll live in a pig. We'll put these into pigs, and then we have all of these things coming together. And then I was like, okay, well, what if they actually take these fabricated embryos? The other part of that was, at the time, there was a thing called an oligo machine, which could print DNA, could print proteins. It's very cutting edge at the time, way before CRISPR. So I put all those things together. Where they reverse engineer the genome, they print the genome one molecule at a time, one protein at a time. They then enucleate a cow egg and put this new cell into the cow egg, put that back into the cow and allow it to gestate, and then they can harvest a herd animal. So that's how my books get done. All these different little things coming together to make hopefully one plot that nobody has done before. That's kind of what you're after, or one scientific concept that hasn't been done. That's how that happens.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about it is the way that you put it together and structure it like that, it makes it so believable. And it's like, that's what really captured me at first. Like, I believe Infected was the first book of yours that I read, and like, everything in there, you're like, this is so plausible. And that's how I'd explain it to anybody. I'm like,
that's my whole game. My game is introduce a bunch of stuff that you already know, make it plausible so that you allow yourself to fall all the way down the rabbit hole, and you give yourself permission to ignore the crazy shit when it comes, because you're just having such a good time being immersed in this thing that feels real. You totally accept when it goes. And that was a crazy thing I learned from my ex-wife when we were still dating, and we went to see Jurassic Park. Somebody had put up Jurassic Park. We went to see it, and I'm like, that was the best thing I've ever seen. It was amazing. What a great movie. And we got back to my place, and that night she starts to cry because she was not very scientifically grounded. And I'm like, what's wrong? It's like, I'm afraid somebody's actually going to do that and bring back dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are going to come after us. And she was not dumb at all.
Yeah.
She just had zero scientific knowledge.
Yeah.
And I'm like, trying not to laugh. I'm like, you think they're actually going to make dinosaurs from DNA found in amber, and they're going to spiral out of control? And I wasn't making fun of her as much as I was like, this is awesome. You can actually, if you show a bunch of scientific stuff to people who aren't professional scientists, they will believe it.
Yeah.
And that's when that changed my writing style right there.
That's freaking awesome, man. Because, that's exactly what you've done. I feel like. Nice. Well, actually, this kind of goes into that question as well. Another fan question is, being a sci-fi writer, are there any cryptids that you believe in, like ghost, aliens, things in that nature? And we've been covering cryptids a lot on our podcast recently.
Cool. So. Yeah. I love the concept of cryptids. Are there any that I actually believe in? As a data-driven person, I had not seen any that I believe are real yet, because biological creatures tend to leave a certain trail. And there are a lot of things. We've discovered animals we've never seen before. We go into places that mankind has never been. We've been several instances of things we thought were extinct, which wind up coming back. But when people really go looking for like the Loch Ness Monster and things of that nature, if they don't find it when they're really with even a modicum of equipment and training, and they can't find something in a relatively isolated place like that, that leads me to believe that they're probably not there. But that doesn't mean they weren't there at one point, because the shared culture, and as you pass stories down from generation to generation, and local lore, folklore, small culture stories passing down, there's really no way to say if that doesn't come from a basis of reality. My favorite one is that almost every ancient culture across the globe has some myth that involves dragons. And it's endemic. It's everywhere. There are some form of, not all have wings, but some form of large reptilian creature. And, we're talking about cultures that have never had any interaction with each other. So when you see stuff like that, that's where it gets really, really exciting, that you're like, that there may very well have been some large reptile, some kind of thing like that was around before recorded history was really a thing. You go back and read any Roman myths, Greek myths, that stuff sounds crazy, but there was, other than usually somebody writing something down hundreds of years after the fact, is the only recorded history. Like a lot of the Roman war, the conflicts in the Roman war and the Spartans, much of that stuff was documented decades or centuries after it actually happened. So there's no way to check whether it's real or not. That's what gets you to think about a lot of these cryptids, like the human giants, dragons, a lot of these mythological creatures, because if anything, when something dies like that, bones don't last all that long. And there's no physical evidence other than stories passed down from person to person. For something to get fossilized, that's a crazy set of a confluence of events for that to happen. So, and also it takes hundreds of thousands to millions and millions of years. So there's no evidence. You can't say for sure those crazy old myths. So that's what I think there were more creatures around than maybe people know. And that gave birth to a lot of these legends, which then grow and morph.
I love that answer so much, actually. And recently there's been there was a fossil that was discovered that was like, they considered it a sea dragon. And I can't remember where they found it, but it was trending on Twitter recently, and I found it, and I was like, how do they know that this wasn't just a regular freaking dragon? It could have been. I don't know. And but
they're much better at it now. But like if you go back and look at the early discoveries of dinosaurs in the 1800s, and like they can all these conjectures of what the things looked like. And they did that based on their best level of scientific understanding. But a lot of times they were doing, like, we found 3 teeth and a femur, and like that's all they've got to go on, and they can only just compare that to other animals. That's why when I was a little kid, T-Rexes were always standing upright and like leaning on their tail, And it wasn't until Dr. Baker and other people came in and like that profile started to change, and they're walking around like that.
Yeah.
So you have no idea. The people who study things for a living tend to know an awful lot. So there are ways they know that was a sea dragon or whatever.
Yeah.
But it does leave it to wonder. There's been enough mistakes that don't get found out till later. Well, I think you get permission to fantasize about it. Like, you don't know. That could very well be a real dragon. It just fell in the water. You don't know.
Right. Yes. There you go. So hopefully that answers y'all's question. They're all saying pretty much, they're all saying dragons are technically reptile species living today. And I don't know. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I like your answer there. I like your answer a lot. Who would have thought dragons would have been there though?
There's a great, terrible movie called Q, and it's for Quetzalcoatl. And this is I think is a 70s movie, I think. Mm-hmm. I saw it, at home at some point. I was like, oh, sweet, monster movie, dragon movie, whatever, I'm in. And that's one of the things they talk about, like that every indigenous culture throughout the history of man, and they're exaggerating for the movie, has a dragon figure. And then, surprise, a dragon gets loose in Manhattan and all kinds of crazy shit happens. But it's super, that kind of thing. It's really fun.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. And then last fan question that we've actually got for you, it is, if you could turn any of your books into a movie or a show, which one would it be and why? And then actually the follow-up question was funny with the Channing Tatum thing. Do you have any actors in mind for any specific characters?
Yeah, of course, as soon as you ask that, I'm great with faces. I'm terrible with names, but Jason Mantzoukas from The League as Pookie Chang, I think would be amazing. Or Ken Jeong as Pookie Chang.
Yeah.
Pretty much all my thoughts around Pookie Chang.
I'm so glad you know The League. Yes.
Oh, The League's. I've watched the whole thing through 3 times. Is one of my favorite shows. Mantzoukas is unbelievable. Yeah. But the thing I want to see get made into a show the most, I haven't even released yet, and I'm working on that next month. It's called The Crypt, and it is about this is 500 years, far future science fiction, military sci-fi. There is the Planetary Union is one of the governments that's in my GFL series, my Galactic Football League series, and I kind of have everything going the same continuum. Planetary Union finds an alien vessel, and this alien vessel is uncrewed and is really weird looking and kind of terrifying, but it is it will do things that no other ship can do. So it becomes a single ship that is not necessarily super powered, but because it can do all this secrety stuff, wind up getting a crew in there that goes on these very hazardous missions. And because they go on very hazardous missions, what happens is a lot of crew members die, and word gets out about the secret ship within the Navy that if you get assigned to the PUV James Keeling, you're screwed. It's like an 80% mortality rate on that ship. But because the ship can do all of this super important strategical stuff, they keep crewing it. And eventually, if you've got any connections, you got a great career track, you got a daddy's an admiral, everybody who's good and a really solid sailor finds ways to not get assigned. So they start getting the worst of the worst and putting them on this ship.
Nice.
And what they do is, like, if you've killed someone, you've raped someone, cowardice in combat, you've struck a superior officer, you've gone AWOL, and they catch you, they get you, and they're desperate to crew this ship. So if you're skilled at all and you screw up, they're like, you do 2 years on the Keeling. That's the real name. It's the nickname is, there's only dead people are in it. They don't know they're dead. If you do 2 years on the Keeling, not only will we not kill you, we'll expunge your record and you get your whole life back. So it becomes this offer that people can't refuse. Yeah. They go on the ship, and then it's a horrible ship full of horrible people doing horrible things to each other while they are in space combat with other ships, and people are dying left and right. It's just going to be an abattoir. It's going to be crazy. But I want to see that get made into a show so that I can actually see that ship. Yeah. That ship go out and actually fly on a TV show. That's what I'm working for. So we'll be working on that next year. Hopefully we'll have the book out sometime 2023.
That sounds freaking beautiful. I love the story, and I like the idea that that's in the same universe, the GFL.
Same universe.
Awesome,
It ain't Star Trek, man. There's not a lot of happy endings in this one. So I'm sure I'll have a lot of my dedicated readers who'll get through like the first 3 chapters and be like, yeah, this one's not for me, and move on. We'll see how it goes.
It's gonna be a hard read. Nice. I like it, man. I like it. You know, sometimes it doesn't need to have a happy ending to be a very, very meaningful story. Don't want to ruin anything, but there's
hopefully it's the stuff I really like is when I go into watching a show or reading a book or a comic book or something and you don't know who's going to make it. I'm more into, because I'm so influenced by slasher films and, monster movies and all the good ones, in my opinion. You don't know who's going to survive. That's why Scream was so brilliant to me, because they take like the biggest young actress in Hollywood at the time and just kill her. First 15 minutes, Drew Barrymore, box office gold, who's on all the posters, is gone. And at that point, I was like, hooked.
Yeah.
So trying to do that with a book of mine is something that I hope people will enjoy a lot. The guessing game of it, who's going to make it, should be fun.
Yeah. I honestly, I recently got into anime again. Like, I was a really big fan of like Dragon Ball whenever I was growing up, and Dragon Ball Z, but anime recently kind of resurged with me with Attack on Titan. It's got a very similar thing. Like, there's people that are like main characters that you're following the whole time, and then you see them die in front of you in like the most graphic, horrible way. You're like, he's not coming back. It's full of surprises, but it's really like
to me, that's the real secret sauce of Stephen King. Is, there are authors like trying to remember the guy who wrote a book called Coma. I think it's Palmer. I think he was a doctor. And then there's Douglas Preston Lincoln Child, who I've talked about. And there are all these authors who wind up with like this team of characters, and they all get in danger, and they all go up against terrible odds, but they all find a way they survive. They're all plucky and survive. And people love that shit. They're reading a book to escape. They love like these 3 characters, no matter what happens, they're going to make it out of this book at the end. They're going to be happy. It's network TV. It's NCIS. There's always, we get everything buttoned up at the end. But what I think has really made Stephen King, other than his exceptional gifts at characterization and dialogue, is when you read one of his books, you got no fucking idea. Like, you're like, I have now spent 300 pages with this housewife who's got this stuff going on. And then you turn the page and she's gone. And you're like, what? And I think that's why there's a lot of authors, you can read their books and be happy, put them down, pick it up a couple days later. There's Stephen King readers are binge readers. Like I had nights where I've stayed up all night long because I can't put the book down. And I think the reason you can't put the book down because he's a sneaky bastard and you can't trust him, and you don't know if you can kill the character that you've already fallen in love with. Yeah. Like you read, Twilight or something, like you're pretty sure these 2 people are going to make it to the end. And that's cool. But the crypt is going to be much more the former. Like, hopefully everybody's neck is on the chopping block every second of every book.
I guess like the major challenge is to really be able to get people connected to those characters before that definitive, like, horrible moment of killing them off. It's like, was The Walking Dead, whenever they killed, I'm trying to think what Glenn, when Glenn died. Oh my God. Yeah. Like, everybody and their mother was like, what the fuck? And it was like the most brutal killing off too. Like, his eyes bulging out of his head, like horrible. Yeah. And, but I remember reading an interview and he was like, it's like the most cherished characters. You have to give them the most gruesome ending, like you have to give them a very meaningful, horrific death to kind of like, And, I don't know. I guess that's the challenge there, to try to capture like that character before bringing it into that.
And that's real hard to do. That's hard for the creators to do. Like you not only you have that fantastic actor, you got the writers, the showrunners, all the crew, everybody's put so much work into this to create a character that people love and want to see every week and follow, and making the decision to kill a character, particularly a main character, is very risky because you can lose people. Like, I won't say what happens in the Infected trilogy, but there are some characters that don't make it to the end. And I, without doubt, that decision that I made as a creator to do that damaged the series, damaged the people following through the series, because there were a lot of people reading it who weren't expecting shockingly weren't expecting me to kill people. And they got there like, that person's no longer with us. I cannot participate in this series anymore. So they knew when they killed Glenn, it was going to cause a problem. They also knew it was going to get a huge amount of press, which helped them a ton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, good Lord, for yours, if that gets turned into a show or a movie anytime soon, everybody buckle up because, Jesus, that was a rough one, man. That was a rough one.
Yep.
But I feel like it was a really, I mean, you have very great creative choices in there that, like, kept those characters relevant and took them out at the perfect time, you know?
That's the challenge, but it's also super gutting for the creator. Like when I have had main characters go, it's friggin' emotional because it hits from a couple different levels. Like I care about this person. When I get, the only way I get you to care about someone that doesn't exist is if I have really done my work to build this person up in my head. I have to care about them to communicate what makes them special so that you should care about them.
Yeah.
And the other thing is like, sometimes people don't get, like, sometimes a character that shows up in a book, just because it shows up in a book in 2022 doesn't mean that the author hasn't been working on it since 2001. Like that person, authors and writers and artists are trying to, I got this idea, but I can't find a home for this person. And eventually you find a home and then you gotta kill them. It's super rough. It's like losing a friend.
Yeah. Well, we've got another fan question really quick. Do you put qualities of people, into the book characters? Like, do you have characters like that you writing them into your book?
For sure. Yeah, because I think every human, no matter how creative they are, has a limited set of ideas, and every imagination is constrained by boundaries to some extent, some less than others. But when you've been in a creative game for a long time, you tend to exhaust all that stuff that you have stored up from watching other movies, from having your ideas or a character you've always wanted to do. And you really start to become a sponge of stuff that's just cool. You know, like I every time I go to a restaurant with my wife, which we haven't been in a while, but when we go out, I do a lot of people watching.
Yeah.
And, you watch somebody do, it's all kinds of little things. Like now in an age of smartphones, if I see somebody pull out a flip phone in a bar, I'm watching that person. Like, what is going on? What is going on there? And you watch her little mannerisms. And then they'll do something like when they go to the flip phone, they just turn their hand like that, like some abstract thing they're not thinking about. But I'm writing that shit down. Like, that's so. I saw something that caught my eye. So if I describe it, it'll catch your eye. And it's those little things that make a character leap off the page and come to life in your brain. And then, so that happens all the time. And then it's kind of nonstop with my friend group too. Like, people will do something or make a decision, or I watch them going through turmoil, and I will I'm sorry you're going through this, but I am stealing all of that and putting it in the book, because if it makes me sad and you sad, it's going to make some other people sad too. So I'll send you a copy for free, but that's going in a book.
I do that with songwriting a lot. I don't know why, but my friends, if they're venting to me about a relationship, I'm like, and then I'm just writing it down, man. But
sometimes it just takes that little thing that you didn't think about, and then that it just careens off your creativity careens off it. And next thing you're not you've got all this horsepower you've built up, but you burn through some of your ideas, and then you get this one little match, boom, then you're off to the races and you go nuts.
Yeah. It's kind of lyrically, anytime I really start getting into something like a muse in a sense, and you seeing a person doing that with a flip phone, just this small little spark will just get that entire thing going. Well, future plans for Scott Sigler. What have we got going on? I know music's on the horizon.
Having a blast making and releasing music with Super Weapon. That's great. We got just the sickest guitarist in the world, Sevi Wada, and just having a lot of fun with that. We're shopping screenplays. We're trying to do all that, aspiring Hollywood person stuff, but the core of everything is the writing. So right now we're working on Galactic Football League Book 7. I'm almost finished with the second draft of that. That's the nerd jock combo I told you about earlier. and as soon as that's done, we go to work on the crypt. And right now the crypt is scheduled to be a 5-book series.
Mhm.
And I just got done telling everybody I'll never write another series, and now I'm like, write another series. And that'll be the focal point for a while.
Yeah.
Keep the podcast going. We live stream every Wednesday with the fans and hang out. So, and all of that really fills up between the music and the live streaming and aspiring to be a Hollywood contributor and writing. That's pretty much all I got time for.
Man, that's insane. And actually, congratulations on episode 1300. That is insanely huge, man. Congratulations.
A lot. Yeah. That's a lot of freaking episodes, man. It was great.
And then it's not like what I do and what other podcasters do that interview people. Like, we don't necessarily have to really have a whole lot of material before going into this. You're doing a lot with those podcasts. It's a lot behind the scenes. So that's awesome.
It's a little bit more isolated, most of it, because most of it, when I started out, even with Nocturnal, I would write a chapter and podcast it every week. So that was a very dynamic live process. It later got edited and refined and polished, but even chopping up the books and serializing, she's crazy. Even chopping up the books and serializing them, it's a lot of time sitting by yourself and doing stuff. The interviewing, like people who are good at interviewing, like that's no small feat to get somebody on, talk to them. Like we went on like 90 minutes now. It's been like, feels like 10.
Yeah. Well, thank you, man.
That's a crazy skill to have, and it's pretty fun.
Thank you very much. I love doing it, man. It's been a lot of fun, and being able to meet really interesting, awesome people and to learn something new about it,
Yeah.
But there you go. So, and we've got, do you have any idea for the release? You said Cryptic is kind of something that's in the works, but you said it's going to be down the pipeline after GFL Volume 7.
Yeah, we did a version of it. We podcasted a version of it like 10 years ago, and it was, I call it, it's a reverse Lost. People are familiar with the show Lost, and Lost, you got all these people on the island and they're stranded and you really don't know anything about their backstories or who they are, or how they got there. And then they spend the whole show gradually drilling out, who these people are, why they're not who they seem to be, etc.
Yeah.
It's a little opposite. What you're going to have is the one we did before that we podcast. What you have is all of these people either getting framed or railroaded or doing horrible things or getting caught doing something bad. And then at the end of all those short stories, they're like, you are now on the crew of the Keeling, and everybody knows about the ship, but nobody's ever seen it. Yeah. Everybody's like, oh my God, I'm going to go on the crypt. I'm so dead. So it's reverse Lost. You get to see how people wind up being on it, but you never get to see the ship itself.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of content for this book ready to go. It's now a matter of reorganizing it and reshaping it. Because for putting out books that I want people to buy, not just free podcasts, you got to see the ship a lot sooner, and you got to be on the ship and immersed in all the mysteries of what is this thing? How does this work? And it's crazy military horror, blood-soaked metaphysics, hallucination stuff. It's having never done acid. I think this book's going to be a lot like being on acid. It's pretty much like.
There you go, man. I'm so stoked for you, man. You've got so much stuff going on in the future, and you have, I mean, like you've mentioned many times before, but I mean, the authors that have inspired you, I think you're inspiring people now. You're like this generation's, inspiration.
That's a trip, dude. I'll tell you what, that's like the two trippiest things you hear as a creator as you begin to get older, like and been in the game for a while, is you meet people who are like, yeah, I've had people describe this, my same fascination with Stephen King.
Yeah.
Driving me into writing. I've had people give me that same talk, like your stuff. Like I did this, and I wanted to do this. So I started to podcast, I started to do this. And I'm just like, why are you listening to me? I'm an idiot. I don't know what. All I know how to do is work hard. I don't really know what's going on. When it shifts it's a little bit crazy. You get that. And then the other thing, it's super trippy, and I still don't know how to process it, is when your creative work sort of becomes a grief escape for people. Like I was going through this and I was having such a hard time, and I didn't know if it was going to end it all or anything was going to happen. And they started listening to your books, and I would listen to your podcast every week, and like that was enough to keep me going. And now I do all of this, and you're just like, it's mind boggling to have that. Nobody knows that's coming. Nobody tries to do that, I don't think.
Yeah.
But like, I'm just a fiction author, and I work really hard to tell a great story. And you can tell I put in the work under the hood, and I didn't cheat you or sell you short because I got bored at the end. Everything delivers.
Yeah.
And to have that go on to be influential in somebody's life is really super cool and super overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think it's because people can sense genuine. You know what I mean? Like it's a real thing that you're doing. It's a real product that you're selling in the sense, like with your stories, with your podcast. It's not something that you're like, well, maybe this will pay the bills, or maybe this will something else. It's
a lot of the podcasting, and now I've watched it extrapolate into like great YouTube creators, great Twitch streamers, etc.
Mm-hmm.
It's the human voice.
Yeah.
That's like when I started doing podcasting, and I had all of these people who were discovering me and being like, wait a minute, this guy wants to be an author. So he's giving away all his stuff for free and he's reading it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're hearing a creator read his own work. And then the other part of it, so you hear all the emotion, and then it would tell them everything. I'm trying to do this. I'm going to this con. I had this conversation with this person, and they get to kind of be part of your story coming up.
Yeah.
And they sort of get to know you because you're in their ear. For me, it was every Sunday, Sunday morning, by hook or by crook, I will be there for you every Sunday morning. And you at least, no matter what's going on in your life, you can count on this episode dropping on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And just having that human voice in your ear of somebody that you're now familiar with and you're rooting for, that's where all that connection comes from. And now with streaming, it's a whole different level, because you get to see the person, experience person's emotion, watch the person having fun, watch them get to do all these things. So it's no surprise that people get so attached to YouTubers and to streamers and to podcasters, because a lot of people are so starved for that contact, man. There's a lot of people are super isolated.
Yeah.
And when they get to hear some stranger who's like, I will be there at this time every Wednesday, becomes a part of their life. And it's shocking what kind of an influence that can have on people.
It's awesome, man. It's awesome. I know, like, especially through the whole pandemic, as soon as lockdown started happening, it was just like avenues like Twitch and YouTube just kind of exploded. And,
even just like you get on there like, oh, I'm just playing video games and telling crazy jokes every week. And like that helps people. That helps people to be like, my gosh, my husband's being a jerk, and my kid, I can't connect to my kid. You know what? I got an hour. This person is not going to judge me, not going to let me down. This person's not going to be a jerk. I just get to go spend some time with someone. And then, what I didn't when I was podcasting, we had a very vibrant community at scottsigler.com. We had our own chat room. We had our own profiles, and 14,000 people a week were going on there and participating. And that became a community. Now the community is much more real time. Like what you do, it's people are in the chat room every time. I love when people apologize for not being in the chat room next week. Oh man, sorry, I can't be there next week. I'm like, it's okay. You got a life. You don't have to apologize to me. It's okay. That's what's awesome.
Yeah, man. I don't know. And then too, like the cool thing about, I guess, like, being in real time now is it's just, you get to form like the friends that I have that are in chat right now are like probably just even more impactful in my life than my IRL friends, the friends that I have that are in real life that I see maybe every couple of weeks or something. Like, I don't know. You get to form real relationships with the people, and like the thing I am the most proud of in what I've done, because that pre-Facebook community we had at scottsigler.com is we still have fans that road trip around the country to go hang out with other fans. That's so cool, man.
That they only met because of our little podcast.
Yeah.
So we've helped facilitate, lifelong friendships. And even way back when we started this, people are like, oh, these aren't real friendships. You never see everybody in person. I'm like, these are the best people on the planet that I talk to every week. They're great. They're awesome. And they're fun and they're smart and they're not jackasses. And like, I spend way more time talking to people online than I do spending time with people in person. Yeah. So like, all that stuff is fun.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I love seeing that. And like, since I've been doing this streaming, we're going on 2 years in February. So starting 2 years in February. And
congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a trip, man. But yeah, since starting this, I've met IRL friends, and people have traveled from other places to Nashville and got to hang out with them. And it's been cool. And like playing music, anytime I'd ever meet like people that I'd talk to through music or something like that, like if we're booking a show and we're gonna go play in Michigan or something, it was always kind of like I didn't know that person whenever I met them, and so there's kind of the awkward like, how's it going? You know, type thing. But with this, anytime I've met somebody from the streaming community, it's been like just picking it right back up from the chat we had, you know, earlier, and real friends. It's awesome, man.
Yep. It's great stuff.
It's cool to know that you were doing that before this existed, though. Like, I think, and then you've got, like, you know, your fans are called the Junkies, and it's probably that for a reason, man. You know, you've got a very genuine connection.
They're all waiting for that hit of, when I was doing Earth Core, they're all waiting for their weekly hit of Earth Crack, which is what they called it. The marketing guy and me was like, oh, yeah, we're going to put that to work right now. That's awesome. But yeah, Facebook killed our site. Just killed it, because we were like this little mini happy Facebook. And then Facebook's much better at it than we were. And like we're like, after a while, we're like, yeah, nobody's really here anymore. We're going to seal up the doors and just go jump over in Facebook with everybody.
Yeah, there you go. But it's cool that you guys have that place now, you know? I mean, I feel like, is it still like, do you feel like it's still as close-knit of a community with? The
community is very close-knit. And there's a group of like, I think 2,100, 2,200 people now on Facebook called Sigler Junkies.
Yeah.
And it's a closed group, because they only want people coming in. Like you have to have some familiarity with the work. So their quiz questions are super easy. Anybody's read any of my books can do it, but but it's a super supportive community. And fortunately they have taken our ethos. Like, when we had scottsigler.com and all those thousands of people every week, we're like, there's no shit talking here. There's no insulting anybody. There's no politics. If you're going to come in and talk this about Democrats or this about Republicans, you're not welcome here. Stop talking about that, or you're gone.
Awesome.
So it became this, it was just a great place for people to come hang out and get nothing but positivity.
Yeah.
And they've taken that ethos into that group. And so I have facebook.com/scottsigler. That's a little harder to manage because it's 25,000 people. But that tight knit group of Sigler Junkies and that group of 2,200 people, yeah, those people all know each other. Those are the people who hang out. That's awesome. It's incredible to watch.
Man, that is awesome. I love to hear that that's going on. Like, I don't know, the fact that you started a community and like you're a community creator pretty much, and all these other things.
Yeah, and we made a point. Like, I participate in Sigler Junkies and I go in and talk to people and like stuff, but we don't run that site. My company doesn't run that site. My wife and I don't run that site. We are not admins. Like we, every now and then, occasionally like a dust up will happen and we'll like DM the admins being like, okay, like this looks like it get out of hand. But for the most part, I've had to do that, I think, twice in the last 3 years.
Oh, dang.
It's just,
yeah,
it's our fans, but has basically nothing to do with us. It's just everybody hanging out and doing their own thing.
That is so cool. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on, man. I appreciate your time, and like, I know you're a busy man, and seriously, thank you for squeezing this into your schedule, man.
It's a blast. Happy to do it. And just you keep at this and think about another 5-6 years.
Yes.
The same stuff. People bringing you on like, well, you built such a cool community. Like, yeah, it's fun.
Nice, man. Well, seriously, thank you for all the encouraging words and for all the advice you bestowed on our chat. I've got a lot of inspiring authors in here, so I really appreciate your time.
Cool. I will say that I did aspiring authors. I did a 6-episode YouTube thing that's still up called So You Want to Be a Writer. So you can go watch that. A lot of the non-storytelling parts of the advice, like how to write your first novel, how to track data, things like that. It may be helpful. A lot of stuff I talked about tonight is all in there, and it's all free. Just go watch it and take what you like and throw the rest out.
There you go. Well, I've written that down. I'm going to actually link that in the description as well too.
Sweet.
And again, Scott, thank you so much. I am so excited to see what the future holds for you, my friend, and hopefully we get to see these books in film and in TV shows.
Hopefully.
Soon, you've got this.
Hopefully. Everybody jot down the name The Crypt, and when that comes out, it's not a kid's book. I'll tell you that.
There you go. I'm excited to read it, man. Well, have a blessed rest of your night, Scott. Take care. Thank you so much.
All right, brother. Thank you much.
Cheers.